So like I was saying, we are going to talk about the Airbnb project, but for now, we wouldn't really have to worry about the full-blown project just yet, right? But what we're really going to do is like walk through some of the modules or the packages that we will be using, and one of them is going to be the um, the command module, right? So this module here allows us to build shell-like features or command line applications, just like we have this something like this, right? It's going to look something like the shell that we built, but very minimalistic. So the idea here is to just have something that is going to be able to take in inputs, process it, and bring back results. And how that is going to happen is that we are going to have specific functions that are going to map to those commands that we want to run. That's how this guy is going to be built, right? So the whole idea is that the command module over here, what it does is that it has a specific kind of um, way that it operates. So let's say that we have a function, or let's say a command, or let's just have a few commands that we would like to run. Right. So let's say we have a command called hello, another one that we would say uh, let's say upgrade, right? So upgrade the person. Let's say like the when the person comes inside, we may or maybe let's think of something. But let's just say upgrade, and we'll probably talk about that later. Then let's also say that we would like to have a command that would essentially let's say show something, right? Because we may want to show what is going on or list out a few things that we've seen so far, right? That means we would have to keep some data anyhow, right? And then we probably also want to understand how some of these commands work, right? So let's just work with these four commands at this point. These will just be used for explaining what we'll be working with. And then later we will build the calculator thing that we talked about, but maybe another time we can work with other things. So you see, these are let's say the commands that we would like to run on the system. And then the command module, how it works is this. For every command that we would want to run, you would have to have an associated function or method that would map directly to it. So this is how it really works. It has this kind of method or uh, style that it works with. For every command that we want to run, the method that we are going to use should be prefixed with do underscore and then the command name. So if you want to have or if you want the user to be able to run hello on the command prompt or on the um, thing that we are about to build, we have to have a method that is called hello, right? So we would have to have do hello, and then everything else can go into this place. The same thing we'd have to um, do upgrade, and then everything will go into this place, right? So for every function or for every command that we would want the user to be able to run, or we want our application to handle, we would have to be able to work with, or sorry, create um, corresponding functions, or what we would say methods, to handle those things, right? So if you would like to handle extra commands, you would have to write extra methods to handle this thing over here, right? So the actual documentation for this here is not very much, and we'll be looking through this documentation as we work with it. For me, I have downloaded the documentation so that it's easier to annotate them for what I would like to work with, right? So according to the documentation, this is how it's going to be working, right? We have this package here. Oops. yeah, we have this package here, and then in that package we have uh, the CMD class, right? So it provides a framework for writing line-oriented command interpreters, as we just talked about. And these are often useful for test analysis, administrative tools, and prototypes that will be later wrapped in a more sophisticated interface. So what we are trying to do today is a starting point of something bigger, right? So just as the documentation is saying, we can see that it's going to be very useful as we go along, right? So these are the objects that we have in them that we can use. Okay, so um, you remember that during the time we were building the shell, I'll be trying to be showing that and a few things just so that maybe we could balance them and see how that would go. I think yeah, I have something like this, right? So in my shell here, you have something like an infinite loop that would run every time, right? Like the shell is running infinitely, right? So this method over here is something like that. The infinite loop that we have in our shell, or we had in our shell, that would continuously prompt the user for input to receive the input, then work with it, right? So that's what this command loop is doing, and we can add a few more things to it if we wanted to. There's an intro session over here, which we could put something there, and all that it does is that it's going to be the first thing that we see when we start the program, right? So that's like what this guy is going to do. It will receive it, right? So long as it has not been broken off or it has not been terminated in any way that is possible, we will just keep on receiving input. And also, there are some things that have been already done for us. Any command that is starting with the question mark is going to be directly dispatch the method called do help, and you can see that they are using the same um, syntax, do underscore the name of the function. So whenever we have something like question mark here, is going to show up or call the do help function. Okay. In the same way, if we have a function, sorry, a command that starts with this over here, the exclamation mark, what it's going to do is also going to call the function called do shell. That is if such a function is defined. So you can see most of the things here are you like we'll be coming back to them, but I would suggest that you also go through the documentation. It's not very much. I think it's less than 5 pages. You can look through them and it's fine. You can get the idea, right? So what is going to happen is you're going to be building a few of like we would be working with this for a while. Then we would get into building out the simple calculator, which is going to maybe add, subtract, and do a few things. Then as we go ahead, we can continue building more stuff. Okay, so now the other thing that I would like to mention is this. This method will return when the post command method returns a true value. What this is trying to say is that the while loop will be exited when a function returns true. Okay, so and this post command here is also something that you can look at in the documentation. It says this hook method is executed just after a command dispatch is finished, meaning that every time a command is finished, this command is executed. Okay, and then since there's a pre-command, so this is executed before the command line is interpreted. Okay, so if you like to do something before you execute a command every time, then you can use this method over here to ensure that is happening. Also, in the same case, if you like to work with or you if you like to do something before the whole loop starts, there's a pre-loop that you can use. And also the same way, if you want to do something after the program has exited, or let's say after the shell is exiting, you can use the post loop. but we'll probably be seeing this as we work with the project and understand more stuff. Okay, so now to start this all up, what we can do is to start our very minimal stuff, right? But there are a few more methods that have not been mentioned over here, and there are a few other things too that are not shown. So these are methods or functions, if you will, and then there are some class attributes that you would also want to look at. There's a prompt which will show us that. So for now, what we are going to do is we are going to work with the minimal version of this command over here, and then see how it's going to actually behave, right? So just as the documentation is saying, what we are going to do is this. We are not going to instantiate the command itself. We are rather going to have a class that would inherit this. Okay, so let's go into our code environment, and then we will start that. So also I wrote a very simple function or a very simple code that would show everything that is inside of the command class, the one with the capital C. Okay, so there's everything that there is inside of that that or this module that we are about to use. Rather, I should say this class, the CMD class, the one with a capital C. Okay, so that's everything that is within that class, and we are going to try to work with that. Okay, so we're going to let's say build out the calculator thing. Right, so we're just going to say calculator.py. All right, so we'll start with our initial things, user being env, that's our shebang, and then just say this module defines simple command line calculator. All right. So here, all we'll do is we'll create a class, and let's say I'll call this calculator, and it's to inherit from the CMD module. And before I do that, I would have to import it. So import CMD, right? That's the module that we are going to use to build this thing over here. Okay, so we have to import it. Okay, so now that it's imported, we can go ahead and then work with it. All right. So you remember that thing with inheritance, right? You remember that we have done inheritance, so this shouldn't look very different to any of us here so far, unless maybe you are from a different cohort that hasn't done this. So now we have inherited this to begin with. So now, for now, we wouldn't really do anything just yet. All I'll do is I'll just put a part over here, right? Nothing will be in the file. So now the next thing that we are going to do is to simply try to run it. And how we run it is that we'll have to come down here and then usually, right, we are working with modules here. So we want it to only run when it is executed directly. So if this is imported into another module, it shouldn't run by default. That's why we have this over here, just in case. So now what we're going to do is we are going to call our calculator class. And then remember that from the documentation, the command loop is what we use to repeatedly issue a prompt, accept input, parse an initial prefix of the received input, and dispatch to action methods, passing them the remainder of the line as argument. Okay, so basically what it's trying to say is that it takes an input, then works on it, just like how we work with the shell. So in this case, we don't have to worry about the tokenization by breaking out a command, finding whether it is that or that. This is going to be handled for us, right? But currently, we've not handled any command yet. But We just want to see how it's going to look by default. Okay, so here I'll just bring that up and then say command loop. Okay, so now the next thing that I'll do is that I would open up a terminal from my VI, right? So I think I'll make it a full screen. Is that still visible at your end? Can you see all edges of the terminal?
Yeah.
Okay. So now what I'll do is I would make this executable so that we can be running it easily. So now when I do this, you can see that I have something here that I'm working with, right? I've not written any command much. It's just that I have inherited from this and it's allowing me to just do something like that, right? So I can just maybe say, for the sake of us, let's just say that I'll do ls, and you can see it says that there's an unknown syntax. It doesn't know about it. When I do question mark, though, I see that the question mark is able to get something, right? Because remember that when we have a question mark by default, it is going to call the do help, which is already provided for us. In the same way, if I do help, it's the same thing, right? So currently, we don't have any functions that we are working with, so it wouldn't work, right? So let's say here, if we do add 1 and 2, nothing would work, right? Because we haven't set the thing that we want it to do. Because remember that we are saying that for every function that we want, so sorry, for every command that we want it to run, we should have uh, like the corresponding method to work with this. Right? So that's what is happening. So for every function, or for every function we write, it's just like we creating a command for it. If there's no function with do underscore whatever, and we try to run a command with it, it wouldn't work, right? So now that we've seen this, let's get back to our code here and then work with a few things. But we can see that here, the command might not look very cool, like we are trying to, like it doesn't look very fine. So we will try to see how we can change that. And how we change that is by modifying the prompt class attribute, and that is this guy over here, right? So if we change this prompt here, we are going to be able to modify our prompt and then make it show whatever we want it to show for us, right? That's how we are going to do that. Okay. So now let's go ahead and then exit out of here. And if I do exit, you see it also doesn't work. If I do Control D, also doesn't work, right? So looks like now I'm stuck in this infinite loop. So what I can do is I can just Control C to get out of this. Okay, so we will handle these things in order as we go through it, right? So let's handle the first thing, which is going to be this. And all that we do is we just say the prompt is equal to, let's say, since we are very comfortable with the shell, I'll just put $sign and just a space after that. Okay. So I'll save this now and then come back to run the calculator. Now I can see that my prompt has changed to a command, sorry, to the $sign. Okay. Again, Control D doesn't work. Exit is not available. So my only option is going to say Control C, right? And to be able to handle this, right, from the command, sorry, from the documentation, they are saying that that Control D that we press is going to be returned back as a string EOF, right? And as it's going to be returned as a string, it means that it's going to be a command, right? So this means that it's going to be similar to us writing something like EOF on our prompt like that, right? So that means we need a function that's going to handle EOF, right? And that's when we press Control D. Okay, so let's write our very first function that's going to do that. And this is not going to be mathematical, it's going to be very simple, right? So what we just need to do is say do EOF, right? Right. So that's how we start the function. So do EOF and then we say self and then the line, right? And I'll share one reason why I probably might not do it this way, and you maybe if you like to take it, that's fine. But usually this is how you would see it implemented. Then remember that this loop will continue to run unless true is returned. Okay, so here what I'll do is I'll return true, and then this is going to magically exit us out of this loop that we are constantly in. Okay, so I'll control C, then run it again. Oops. Okay, left something out there. So yes, it's a function that I'm defining. So now when I go ahead and then I type something like EOF, for example, you can see that it's able to exit out of it correctly. In the same way, we wouldn't really type EOF on the command prompt. What we'll do is we probably type or press Control D for us to to press Control D so that it's exits out of here for us, right? So we can see that pressing Control D exits out of this of the prompt of the program that we were in, but then here it's on the same line, right? But we don't want that, okay? So we probably have to come here and then just say that we want to print a new line over there, right? And also, I think maybe with our calculator, we probably say something like cal. Yeah, something like that might be a bit more fine. Or if you have a different idea, you can let me know for the prompt so that we can use that. Okay, so now we've written our very first command, which is called a do EOF. And the reason why I'm saying that I wouldn't really like to use this one is this. You see, every time you write a function or a method in a class and you never use the self attributes and the class attributes, you really don't have to do do this. And you can see also that I don't use this line anywhere in the function itself. So what I rather like to do is to make this a static method. And a static method does not depend on whether it's a class or is an instance of the class. Right. So what I'll do is I'll just say static method. Right. And then here now I can get rid of this self. Right. Because I never use this self anywhere in the function itself. And also per Python, like per Python, anytime that you are using a variable that you don't use, let's say you are just using it like for using sake. Let's say you are trying to write a for loop, right? So let's say you are saying for I in let's say range 100 print hello world, right? You see that within this for loop here, we never make use of the I itself, right? So the Python, it's recommended to use the underscore because we don't use the I itself, right? So that's what I'm going to do right here. Hopefully that makes sense because we don't use this I itself anywhere in the for loop itself or in wherever it's being used. So for me, what I would like to do is to simply replace this line here with an underscore because I don't use it anywhere within the function itself. So I'll take a moment and then see if you have any questions about this so far, particularly maybe about the reason why this function is the way that it is. Any questions so far?
None from my end.
All right. Is that the same for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, all right. So let's go ahead and then run this one more time, and I'll press Control D, and you can see that it's still working. All right. Okay. So the first way that we did it is fine, but I prefer to do it this way because I don't use the self or anything over there, right? Because if I'm doing an EOF, I'm trying to safely exit out of the prompt or the program, right? But if you use it, you can keep them there, right? I'm just saying that I don't use it, so I don't want to keep it over there, right? If we were using it, then we could have kept it there, but since it's of no use at this point, I would not use it. Okay. And also, we would also want to, let's say, have an exit function, right? So we would have a function that we like to work with it and say exit, right? Or maybe quit, right? So what we can do is really just also create a function for it, right? We can say def quit, and then we can do the same thing over there. And since these guys are about the same, how about if we do something like say that, okay, what if we say do quit is equal to do EOF? Do you think this is going to work, or have you tried this before? All right. So for the sake of time, let's go ahead and then try this. So when I say quit here, you can see that quit works all right because I've said that quit is equal to EOF, right? And do EOF is a function, right? So whatever do EOF does, that's what do quit is also going to do, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So if you have do exit as well, we might probably want to use do exit and those things, but that's for another time, right? So for the sake of learning, you would also write a function called do quit, right? And also what this does is it doesn't take like the function that it takes, we don't use it. So I'll also make it a static method and just return true. All right. So here as well, when we run our program, when we say quit, it does that for us nicely. And the other thing with this one in here is that we do not print a new line over there because it's simply just going to quit out with that. And because we pressed an enter key, so we don't need that. Okay. So now we've probably seen a few things so far. We've seen that we can modify the prompt using the prompt class keyword, and also we can do a few things, right? So you see that, for instance, when we start a prompt or something like this, we would like to, let's say, have an information like to tell us, okay, how can we work with this or how can we handle a few things. Currently, our thing here is not giving us that, right? So if you remember from the documentation, we saw something like intro is equal to none, right? So with the intro equal to none, remember that they are saying that if you have the intro set to something, we can use it for something else, right? So down here, we have this intro thing, right? So a string to issue intro or banner, right? Banner is just like to show up something, like the way that maybe when you go somewhere, like let's say if you open a shell, maybe they would show some information about maybe there's this number of IP addresses over here or this number of update that could be done. Basically, some information that is shown on the screen for you to see, right? And this over here can be overridden by the command loop method if there's an argument given to it, right? So that means that we can either use this class method, sorry, class attributes, or we can pass in the introduction string directly to the command loop method. So let's try both options. So here, what we'll do is you say calculator 1.0, and then we will just tell them to type question mark or help um, for um, for let's say available commands. It's I have yeah, I have like a strict something on 80 characters per line on my system. That's why it's doing that by default. So what I'll do, I'll leave it like this for now. So all that we are saying is that when we are calling this function here, or when we are starting the loop, we want this to be our intro, right? So you want to say that this calculator v1 like 1.0, right? And we are telling them to press enter or something for, sorry, type question mark or help for commands that are available. So in the same way, what we can do is we can come back to the calculator, and you can see now that it's able to show that, right? Calculator 1.1 v1.0 and blah 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 like that, right? And because this is run once, when I press the enter key, nothing else is going to show. Okay, so now if I press question mark, I see that it's working all right. But there's something that I would like to point out before we continue. We have this over here, the person, sorry, the intro, but we would like it to maybe come down, like there's a bit of space between that and the first prompt. So all we can do is to bring in the new line character, and this in here is going to be a little bit problematic. Okay, so that's what we are going to do over here. Okay, so now I can go ahead and then exit out of here and then bring that, and now it's working all right. We could do extra things over there, which is going to be fine, but we just leave it like that. And since we mentioned that we will look at both options here, I'll copy everything that is here, and then come to this top over here, and then create the class method, and then paste it here instead, right? So this intro over here is rather going to be the one that is going to show up, right? So currently you can see that over here, the intro is not there, but we've rather placed it as a specific class attribute, public class attribute, right? So you can see that still it's there. Now, the thing that I said I wanted to clarify here is, let's say this, when I do the question mark and I press the enter key, this is what is there. But now if I press the enter key again, still the previous command that I run is still being executed, right? So if I keep pressing the enter key, you can see it's still doing the same thing, right? If I type help, it's fine, but then like every time it's still the same thing that is showing. Like I'm pressing enter key at this point. And maybe to make it clearer, what I'll do is I'll come here instead. Like I've opened up a newer window to show what I'm trying to say. So calculator, and then I press help, for instance. Right now, when I keep pressing the enter key, you can see that is a previous command that keeps being executed, though I've not pressed any key, anything yet. Just pressing the enter key, right? And the reason why that is happening is because of this here, right? According to our documentation, it says that method, this empty line over here is called when an empty line is entered in response to the prompt. So the prompt is what we see when we like this prompt over here, this prompt. All right. If this method is not overridden, it repeats the last non-empty command entered. So here, what we have to do is to simply override that command, sorry, that method that is available. So since I wouldn't want you to do anything, what I'll just come here and then say is this. Oops. So for the sake of keeping it simple, I'll write the code here and then run them here so that we can keep our eyes focused on code and execution. So here I'll write the empty line. All right, so we're just writing the function or the method to do that, and this is how it is. It doesn't take any arguments, right, or any parameters. So here, all I'll do is I'll just say pass. Right. Let's see whether that's going to help us to do anything of that sort. Right. So here, we are just saying that when we receive an empty line, just pass. Don't do anything. That makes sense, right? So now I'll quit out of here and then do the calculator one more time. Now let's say when I do help, right? And now when I press the enter key, you can see that it just pressing enter, like it does doing the normal enter thing that it's supposed to do. It's not writing or it's not executing the last command that was executed, right? So that's what is happening. And though here it is doing this, it's still executing the command, all right, but then remember that it's saying that it's repeats the last non-empty command that was entered by default, right? And we have overridden that behavior so that it doesn't do that by default. So just in case if you are working with it and then you realize that your previous commands are being entered when you are writing, or like when you're pressing the enter key, then this is your guy. That's the one that you would have to come back and then work with, like override. Right. Most of the commands here can be overridden, right? We understand this so far from like inheritance and a few other stuff. Okay. So now we've seen this, right? So we've actually not even started our actual calculation thing, but you can see that we are trying to cover a few things. Okay, so now let's go ahead and then handle some few stuff that we probably work with, right? So here, when you're writing the command, maybe you might have something like add 1, 2, right? And that, or we can have something like add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that, right? So we would probably not know how many numbers they would enter. So let's see how we might go about doing something like that. Okay. So here, let's just say we do a function called def do add, right? And here we would have to give it a self, and then the extra thing that we have to do is pass in the line, or we can say args, anyhow that you want to call it, right? Here, what I'll do is I'll call it line. Right? So now the thing here that I would like to do is very simple, right? We are going to receive some commands. So it's going to look something like this. We say something like add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like, or let's make it simple for now. Right? Just add 1 and 2. Okay, so here, this thing here is going to be received as a string. So we have to have a way to handle it, right? So we probably have to split this based on spaces, right? So first thing that we have to do is to split this guy over here. So after we split it, it's going to look something like this. We are going to have oops. We probably have add 1 and 2 as a list, right? When we split it. So we split this over here, then we are going to get this. Okay, so at this point, we can be sure that the first thing we have is going to be the command, and then everything after this, like everything after the first index is going to be the thing that we are trying to add, right? So now, when we receive the add command, we can do something similar to what we just talked about, right? So here we can just split it, then try something else on that. So here I can now come and say args is equal to line.split, right? And the split method would split on spaces by default. Okay. So since it's splitting on spaces by default, what we can do is just go ahead and then say something like this. What we can actually do is this. You remember the keyword arguments that we did or we worked with, right? So before I do that, I'll just print out the args for you to see. Right? So I'll split the args and then split. Sorry, just print them out for you to just see. Okay. So now let's write the calculator. Then I'll just say add 1 and 2. Right. So you can see that I have 1 and 2 inside of the arguments, like inside of the of this, like inside of this list, right? So now what really needs to happen is that we would have to also make sure that this becomes integers, right? So we understand that we can, well, either we might use, let's say, a map or something else that we would like to do, right? So for the sake of this, what we rather do is we'll use the map function. And what we want to do is to convert all of this into an integer, right? So that's what like the map function is going to do. It's going to take in like this input over here and then convert it, like apply the integer function on top of all of them. Right, so let's exit out and then try this one more time. So add 1 and 2. Oops, sorry. I would have to put this into a list. So quit. And then let's try that again. So 1 and 2. Right, so now you can see that 1 and 2 are returned as normal numbers, right? So we have basically taken out the exact thing that we want to work with. But since this over here is going to be something that is going to be done consistently, because we when we are working with the subtract method, we would also have to get the numbers, the multiply, we also have to get the numbers, right? So what I would rather suggest is to instead write a particular function that is going to handle this for us, right? So let's just say that here I'll cut everything here, and then rather we would have a function, let's say called, let's say get numbers, and then we will pass in the line. Okay, so we are rather going to have a function that's going to return the numbers, right? So let's like a list of numbers. So here, what we rather do is you call the thing here like get numbers, and this is going to take the line, right? And also remember that this is not going to be dependent on the class or on the instance. So this has to be a static method, right? So here, all that I'll do is I'll just say that return, oops, sorry, return this here. All right. So here, what I'm actually doing is just returning the list of numbers, right? So we saw that when we had it this way, we're able to retain the number, but then we will need this for the extra thing that we are going to be working with. So I suggested that we write a specific function that will handle that. Okay, so that's what is happening over here. Then we would have, then all that we do is you just call the function to bring it back to us. So let's test to see whether our current function is working correctly. So I'll click it here, and then let's try one more time. So I'll say add 1 and 2. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I guess my bad. What I would have to do is to probably bring this guy. Oh, sorry. Actually, it have to be self.get that. Okay. So let's try again. Add 1 and 2. And you can see that it's still working. Right. So I'm in a class, so I would have to like call it like that, right? It's part of the class, so I would have to call it this way, right? Or we could have it something different, but this what we are trying to do. It's going to be a static method, and it's just going to get the numbers for us. Okay, so we can see that it's working all right. So now, based on what we understand so far, we know that there's going to be a list of numbers, right? The args, okay. And from our understanding of the keyword argument and then the args, right? That args and args, right? The double star and then the star args Right. So now what we can actually do at this point is to just say something like, I would want to print the sum. Right. We are going to call the sum function. We are going to pass in the argument. Right. And here is going to be the list of arguments. Right. So I'm calling it with the star args. Right. And that's how it's going to work. But like, do we get why this is going to, or like why we are doing this, why we are doing something like star arcs? Is it clear to everyone, like this star arcs then?
Not really clear to me. That was what I was asking in the previous meeting.
Okay, yeah. So that one, it was actually like here, he was using the arcs over here, right? Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm
Sorry,
using.
I'm not sorry. Sorry for interrupting you. I don't know if it's my end, but I'm not seeing your screen.
Come again.
Like everyone is just like I'm not seeing the screen again. You share.
Oh, all right. Hold
Well,
on. Let me
let
just.
me leave and enter. I don't know if it's mine or
I'm trying to reshare it so you can know that.
okay.
Let me know when I've reshared it. So can you see it?
Let me. Are you sharing it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's from your side, but it's on at this point. All right. So as I was saying, we are trying to use this act over here just so that we can pass in the list of um, numbers, right? So that's what we are trying to do at this point. So when I do calculator and then let's say I do add 1 and 2, oops, sorry. Uh, actually, my bad. What has to happen is I would have to pass in like the list itself, not star the star arcs. Okay, because the the sum function takes in an iterable. Okay, so let's go ahead and then run this again. So add 1 and 2, and then you can see that it's 3. Again, when I do add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can get the result as 15, right? So it was an error on my part to put in the star over there, right? So the star over there is used for other cases, which we could explore, but then this over here is not what I should have done previously, right? Because the sum function takes in an iterable like a list, right? So um, that's the correction that I'm stating there. Okay, so now the add over here is working all right, right? So, but then when I try to do something like subtract 5 and 3, it doesn't exist, right? So that's something that I would have to work with. Before we get there, right? When I do help add, you can see that there's no help on the add, right? And there are two ways that we can actually write help on this function, either by using the doc strings, like something like say something like adds2, or let's say adds numbers together, or um, print the sum of numbers, right? So now it's either through here that we can get like the help, or you can have specific methods that will do this. We will see that soon. So I'll exit out of here, and then when I do calculator one more time and try to do help add, you can see that now I'm seeing the print help, print the sum of numbers, right? Like that. But then you can see that sometimes what happens is that we write more than one line, like one line docstring. And what I like to do is to have it written something like this, where I would have to bring in the argument that I'm receiving, which is going to be the line, and this line is going to be a string, right? So let's say this is going to be the line containing the okay, let's say the line received from the prompt. Right. So now you can see that with this, if I come back to the calculator and I check help on add, this here is not very cool, right? Like if we are to be using the normal doc string that we use, but if your doc string is just like this, it's okay to use it. But then let's say if you are writing a function that you have to document heavily, it's not a very good option to use that as your normal help function, like your normal help when you execute that, right? So usually the help or the help command would grab the doc string and work with it. Or what it can do is that when you have a specific method, like something like this, right? So for the commands we use do add, but for when we need the help, we can say help and then the command that we want to write the help on, right? So I can say help and then I can bring this. Okay. So now the other thing that I need to do is just say this. I can say this. What it does is this. Let's say it's prints the sum of numbers, and then the usage is something just like this, add, and then numbers. Right. So we can either have this or that. So now let's look at the dynamic of how this happens. So now when I do calculator and I say help add, you can see now that it's showing the prints the sum of numbers and this one instead. So it's rather using the specific method that I have written for the help rather than using the do add. Jason, are you trying to say something? I see there's activity on your microphone. Um, but I can't hear you though. So just in case if you're trying to say something. Okay. All right. So you see this help add over here is the one that is now being shown rather than the doc string that we had. Right? So it's either you may default to using your doc string as your help information, or you can write a specific help for the users to use. Right. So if you find that maybe your doc string is enough as a help, something for the users, that's fine. But if you find that maybe your doc string might be quite not good for them to work with, then that's fine. You can write a different function like this help add over here, right? Because you see that sometimes with doc strings, we may have to explain a few things that the function is doing, which is not particular to how the person maybe just using it would use it, right? So this extra method, which is the help underscore, whatever command you are trying to get help on, you can use that as your other means of doing the same thing here. And I also mentioned that this over here is not doing anything really. But then what if I try to do this? I remove this over here, and then I call this also a static method. right? So just trying to show something here. So let's go ahead and then try to do help add, right? You can see that it's still working, right? So all I'm trying to say is that when you find out that you are not using the self arguments or the class, what is the CLS argument over here, like that, it's much preferred not to use those things, right? You can use a static method instead, but using that also doesn't hurt. But I'm just saying that when you don't use them, um, like for me, I wouldn't use them, and it's just, let's say, by practice, and if you like to also pick that up, right? So in the whole of your function, if you realize that you never use the self argument or you never use the CLS, which is a class method, then the function is actually a static method, right? So maybe if you are thinking about how do I know whether I should use a static method or a class method or that, like the normal self, or basically, since we are talking about static methods, if you find that you are never using the self argument in any of your functions, then you probably have a static method. All right. So that was just by the way. So here, everything is still working as it's expected to. So we can go ahead and then write out the other things to work with it, right? But for that, I probably wouldn't do much of that because at least at this point, we've seen that when we use the do add, we're able to get out information uh, with that, right? Because for every function that we want to write, we have to be able to um, or for every function that we want to run, we have to have um, a corresponding method, which is prefixed with do underscore. Right, so do underscore the name of the command. Okay. So also we've seen the do quits, and then we've also seen the do EOF. The do EOF is used to um, like handle the control D. Okay. So this is also going to be true when we have the non-interactive mode. So let's say when I do something like echo add 1 and 2, then I pipe it to my calculator, right? You can see that here I'm getting 3 over here, right? But then maybe you may not want this to be showing up. I can see that still my prompt is showing up, right? So what we can do is just like we did in the shell, we can handle whether it is an ATTI or sorry a TTY mode or that, right? And in Python, what we can do is we can handle it with the OS module, right? And here inside of that, we can also bring in the sys module. And the reason why I'm saying that is, let's say when I just go into an interactive Python like mode and I import the sys module, I can say something like sys standard in, right? That's what we are trying to check whether it's a TTY mode, right? And then because the prompt is going to receive input, so we are trying to check where the input is coming from. Okay, so if the inputs like this here, we are checking the file number. We can see that the standard in file number is this. So I could have written that over there, but then it's much more, let's say, nicer to write this than just write the 0. So the standard in file number is this, right? So just as in the shell, we had to check it is something similar to this over here. So the way that we do that is this. What I'll do is I'll just check if OS dot there's a function called is ATTY, right? So I'm checking if the current standard in file number that we have here is an ATTY mode or is in a terminal mode, or what we would say is interactive. Then the prompt is equal to the calc that. Else the prompt would be equal to nothing. All right. So this could be one way that maybe if you want, you can handle the, um, let's say, non-interactive mode. So let's come back and then try this. So I'll run the same command again. Oops, sorry. Oh, sorry. Actually, I meant sys Yes. So run that again, and now you can see that the previous calc prompt that we saw is no longer there. Right. So that's also one thing that you would like to work with. And there's one more thing that I want to say. All right. So let's say that if I get rid of this do EOF command, which is the one that handles the control D, let's say if I get rid of that, okay, and I try to do something non-interactively, let's see what is going to happen. All right. You can see what is happening here. Right. It's going to do this continuously. Right. So when we are working with the non-interactive mode, you'd also want to make sure that um, your do EOF method is set correctly, else you have what I just showed over here. It's going to just do this infinitely, right? So make sure that you are handling the EOF before you even try to think about handling non-interactiveness. Okay, so now with this, we can see that right after that, we exit out of this. Okay, so the thing here is that every time that we return true while we are in the command loop, it signals it to exit. That's per the documentation, what it says. Okay, so I would probably end here for today. We've seen how to work with a few things here. We've seen that the intro attributes is able to give us some introduction when we are getting into the program, as well as we can now handle this by using the SATTY and then figuring out whether we are in an let's say interactive mode where we run command and then it shows us our inputs and we wait for another input. Right. We've seen that, and then we have like handled it based on what happens or what is available. In the same way, we also handle the control D or the EOF, whereby let's say if the user presses control D, we're able to receive that and just return true. So again, the return true is how the command loop, this loop over here, knows that it is time for it to stop. Okay, that's per the implementation, how they've made it. Then the do quit. So the do quit over here is our command that we use to quit it. So you can see this is do EOF, and I was saying that here we don't usually write EOF there, but we can actually write EOF, which is also fine, right? But then usually what we rather do is press Control D like that. Okay, so that EOF is the same thing as that. Whenever we type Control D or we press Control D, it actually sends EOF to the prompt. Okay, so that's why we had to have this over here. And then for the empty line, we talked about the fact that if we didn't have this, what happens is that the previous command that we had keeps repeating itself, the like previous non-empty command, right? And just to bring it up again, right? This empty line over here, if we didn't override it, the last non-empty command will be repeated, right? It will keep repeating itself. We saw that in the beginning. Okay, so here all I've done is overriding that method so that it does nothing, just so that when we run the command, it doesn't keep repeating what was there before. And to just show that one more time before we leave, I'll just get rid of that and then come back to the prompt. Right. So let's say I do add 1 and 2. Right. So now I've just written add 1 and 2. I'll just press the enter key, and you can see that still I'm getting 3. Right. So it is still repeating add 1, 2. It keeps doing that, right? Because I've not overridden that empty line function or method, right? So this over here is executed every time that we pass in an empty line, right? Just like just pressing the enter key without anything. So to be able to handle that, we just have to have a function that would override it. And that's the simple function we have over here to just do nothing, just to pass, right? To just not do anything, let it just slide by, right? So that's the reason why we have this empty line over here. Then this do add is just to perform addition, right? So we could have do subtraction, do multiplication, do everything like that, and then within that side we could handle the actual operation of multiplication right there, right? But with this, you get the idea of how to handle that. Okay, and then we also wrote a function called the get numbers, which would grab the numbers from the line that we receive, which is how we are able to get the numbers to add them together. Then we also went through how to either use the docstring as our default help, or we can have specific methods written for the help that we want to receive. Okay, so if your docstring is okay for you, then you can use that. Else you can write a specific help on that command. Right. So if you want a command to be executed, or if you want to be able to execute a command on your prompt, you would have to prefix it with the do add. So do underscore the name of the command. But if you want to add help for that function explicitly, then you'd have to use a help underscore the name of that command, right? So I added help for the add command over here. And that is really everything with this thing over here. Okay, so everything else that you know about writing Python code still applies over here, like to override things, to inherit stuff. Basically, everything is still the same, right? So maybe you can try out a few other things with this over here, right? But this one was supposed to be very simple, right? So if there are any questions, we can take that, and then if we are all okay, we may end the session for today and then try again another time.